Hey guys, how are you doing? At the heart of every biological process, from how cell divides to how gene expresses, lies a powerful blend of biochemistry and genetics, and this fusion is called molecular biology. In today's video, we will explore how life functions at molecular level through the language of biochemistry guided by chemical forces like covalent bonds and hydrogen bonds. So let's begin our discussion. Here we go. First, we will talk today about how biological function, right? So, biological functions can be studied through the eyes of biochemist and, as I have told you, through geneticist, right? So, biological functions. So, there are two ways to study, biological functions. One way, proteins and biological functions. Okay, let me write from here. Biological processes can be studied through this way, right? Proteins, and the heart of geneticist is genes, basically, right? So what you do, actually, proteins are fundamental, they are fundamental to lives, and they are main actors. This is the language of biochemistry. On the left side, what I am talking of language of biochemistry, right? Language of biochemistry. Protein, you must have heard this topic from your basic science course, right? Proteins are basically, they are amino acids, nitrogenous compounds, right? So we talk about their structure also, right? Structures, as I have told you, they are amino acids. Amino acids simply mean they have NH2 group. We are going to talk about that. And how biological system work. How biological system work, right? System works. Through the eyes of geneticist, for example, if some geneticist, right? Geneticist, they study gene. You know what? So, in nutshell, you should understand basic thing. So biological functions mean there is organism, right? So what they do, they break it down organism into, for example, they break it down into organs, right? Then organs are again broken down into tissues. Then again these tissues are broken down into cells. These cells are again broken down into cell organelles, right? These cell organelles are again broken down into, say, finally, organic molecules or biomolecules, basically, right? And one of these biomolecule is protein, right? Biomolecules. So biomolecules, this is the strategy of biochemist. What they study, basically, they just break it down, the entire organism, break it down up to a very small level, and which we call biomolecules. For example, we have biomolecules like carbohydrates, we have proteins, we have lipids, so on and so forth, right? Geneticists, what they do exactly, what they do, actually, they study gene. They study whole organism, and except one thing, and which is called mutation. So mutation is something, gene means genesis, right? So we have DNA, right? DNA double helix structure, Watson and Crick, 1953. This, suppose this is one strand of this DNA, and informations are, informations are in pair, double information is double. So if this is for example, if this is DNA and these are bonds, these are base pair, basically, which are bonded with some chemical forces, which we are going to talk today. And as this course progresses, we are going to talk detail about DNA and all, right? So this, suppose this is basically functional segment. This is called functional segment of DNA. This is called gene. This segment will code a protein, basically, right? So it has information coded into this part, and it will make then messenger RNA, and these messenger RNA are basically a templates of this code, and then ribosomes will make proteins. We will talk about this in detail, right? So this is how they do, right? So units in which informations are coded, basically, they are what? Units in which genetic informations are coded. Genetic informations are coded. तो I hope आप लोगों ने सबने DNA के बारे में पढ़ा होगा. Genetic informations, right? Genetic informations are coded. We are going to talk about this in detail, right? Then there is unification of these two, biochemistry and genetics, which I have already told you. It is called basically molecular biology, right? So molecular biology is kind of check, molecular biology It is, kind of basic principles, basic laws of biology, which can be applied to interesting biological problems, which I have already talked in other video. For example, like cancer, for example, like, autoimmune diseases, how our nervous system functions, so on and so forth, right? Okay, for example, one development, which is very, very, revolutionary development in 1975, we have this is called recombinant technology, DNA recombinant technology, DNA recombinant technology, combinant technology. सब अगर मान लो हमारे पास मॉलिक्यूलर बायोलॉजी के लॉज नहीं होते, तो हाउ डू यू हैव दिस टेक्नोलॉजी, डीएनए recombinant technology. So DNA recombinant technology is basically by virtue of, this unification of biochemistry and genetics, right? What they do, what exactly they do in this, technology, we will again talk about this in another video, in detail video. In DNA recombinant technology, in nutshell, if I were to say you, different DNA from different species they are joined together, they are fused together, and then this hybrid DNA is basically inserted into a host cell, right? So DNA from different species, in one line, let me tell you, different species are fused, it is fused, and this hybrid DNA is again inserted to a host cell, and then see, how these functions, biological functions, are basically how they are now impacted, right? So this is what it is. So biochemistry, once again we are talking today about biochemistry. So in biochemistry, what we study how these bonds are broken, how these chemical forces or bonds are broken. We are going to study about shapes, 3D shapes of proteins, and how these shapes fit in, they fit in exactly same. This is what we study here. In genetics, what is studied basically? Genetics is basically based on, it is based on mathematics. Gregor John Mendel was mathematician, and most of the geneticists, famous, geneticists, they are mathematician. So they study about probability, they study about probability of expression of any gene. They are based on statistical, data, statistical, probabilities, statistical outcomes. It is based on logic games, they call logic games. One example is PCR, right? So we are again going to talk about it in detail. So let's move ahead. Let's talk about chemistry of the cell. Okay, again 9th class chemistry है ना, सब लोगों को NCERTs पढ़नी है, at least 9th class, up to 9th class, you all have to study it. If we were to talk about two-way, this discussion, atomic structure, for example, if we were to atomic structure or atomic composition, atomic structure of this, what? Structure, atomic structure of cell. So cell is what? Cell is structural. What is cell? It is a structural and functional unit of life. है ना? So cell biology is most important, and UPSC is going to ask you about this thing. And now, which I have already talked you, biology has become now full-fledged science. It means there are some principles, that can be applied to general problems, right? जैसे न्यूटन्स लॉज पढ़ते हैं ना, तो न्यूटन्स लॉज में हम क्या पढ़ते हैं? F equal to ma, and F equal to ma can be applied to a large very number of problems. In the same way, in the same analogy, biological principles, biological laws can be applied to general, biological problems, right? So it has, if you were to talk about this cell, so atomic structure of cell consists of 60% of hydrogen. Hydrogen is element, है ना? आपको बहुत basic science आनी चाहिए. 20% of cell has oxygen. Around 12% it has carbon. So this is basically organic, right? Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, right? Okay, organic part, right? 5% nitrogen. 5% is nitrogen. Okay, and remaining, so 80, 92, how much is this? 97%, right? So remaining 3%, cell consists of phosphorus, P for phosphorus, S for sulfur, Mg for magnesium, then manganese, selenium, etc., sulfur, etc. Okay, some proteins have sulfur in their chemical or chemistry basically, right? What is molecular composition of the cell? So let's talk about molecular composition. So let me give you the brief idea of molecular composition, right? So molecular. Interestingly, molecular composition of cell composition, 80% it is water, right? So it simply means if you have like this, so only 20% other things are there. Graphically speaking, it has 80% of water. This is water, and remaining 20% are other things, right? Okay, so 80% water. It consists of 80% water. Life is based on water. 80%. 80%. This is water, and remaining 20%. Remaining molecules are 4 major macromolecules we are going to talk, and remaining 20%. Remaining this 20%. Remaining 20% other molecules. So life is based on around 60 to 80% part of any cell is water, right? So this is remaining part, right? And this remaining part is basically, it has 4 macromolecules, 4 major or macromolecules. This is very basic video and very basic class on biochemistry, and we are going to develop more chemistry, more basic science slowly, okay, gradually. So proteins, 20% ka 50%, right? So 50% of this remaining part, 50% of remaining 20%, whatever, are proteins basically. Then you have nucleic acids, right? We are going to talk about nucleic acids. This is the basic. DNA RNA से question ना आए, ऐसा नहीं हो सकता है. So if you are a sincere student, then you should know about DNA and RNA, basic thing about DNA. Every second day you will get newspaper headlines or newspaper article on DNA and RNA technology, 15%. Then we have carbohydrates, 15% of remaining, right? Then we have carbohydrates, they are also around 15% of remaining, right? And then 10% lipids and other molecules, right? Around 10%. And then other molecules, right? So this is the molecular composition of a cell, right? So what we should understand, how biochemistry is basically about bonds breaking, right? So chemical forces, we are essentially going to talk about some chemical forces, those how these molecules are bound together or these elements are bonded, right? Typically, there are 2 major forces, 2 major forces which we are going to talk today, and these 2 major forces are sufficient to understand carbohydrates, proteins, lipids and nucleic acid, right? And these 2 forces are, one force is called covalent bonds, right? Covalent bonds in 9th class, again 9th class chemistry. And hydrogen bonds, I don't know, you must have heard of hydrogen bonds. I don't know whether you have read it or not. These forces, actually these 2 forces are enough. For example, you can study, what you can study with the help of these 2 forces, these 2 chemical forces basically. You can study structure of carbohydrate, you can study nucleic acid, right? We can talk, if you want to understand about basic of DNA and RNA biology basically, you have knowledge of these 2 forces, you can understand, right? So for example, you can read about proteins with the help of these chemical forces. You can talk about lipids, fats, cholesterol, we are going to talk the basic difference, right? So this is the idea of basic. All right. So quickly, let me tell you what are covalent bonds from 9th class. This is nothing but principal force that holds atoms together, and it is based on the sharing of electrons. Simply, it is based on the sharing of electrons. Okay. So this is one of the principal force. One of the principal force, how atoms are bonded. How atoms are bonded. In easy language, bonded, right? In easy language, it is based on principle of sharing, sharing of electrons. It is based on the principle of sharing of electrons. Electrons are shared basically, right? Best example, methane. We should know about methane. For example, carbon, or otherwise you can talk about carbon bonds, right? So carbon, for example, if there is one bond between carbon, these two electrons are shared, this carbon needs four electrons, four more electrons. So atomic structure of carbon is what? Carbon has 6 electrons, and they are, from the Bohr-Bury's law, they are distributed like 2 and 4. If you don't know about this, please do comment and I will let you know, how this thing works. K, L, M, N cell, right? These are called principal quantum numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is very basic chemistry, right? So every, those elements which are not inert gases like helium, neon, argon, krypton, they needs 8 electrons in their outermost shell, right? So it needs 4 more electrons. It cannot, get rid of these 4 electrons, or it is very difficult to get another 4 electrons. So what is the strategy of carbon? Carbon makes bonds, covalent bonds. It shares electrons. For example, this sharing, this single bond sharing, and it is called saturated carbons, by the way. You should know this terminology because this is going to help you understand lipids. Saturated carbon, right? Saturated hydrocarbon or carbon, basically, this one electron is shared, For example, there is only one carbon, it has 4 electrons in outermost shell, and if these dots are showing 4 electrons of carbon, then these 4 electrons are coming from other element. For example, I can have carbon, and better if I don't have carbon, say hydrogen, for example, this electron is coming from hydrogen, and hydrogen fortunately needs only one electron to complete its cell. Hydrogen has only one, hydrogen has only one electron. It needs only one electron to complete its octet, but it doesn't need 8 electrons. It needs only 2 electrons, right? So this is bond. This is called sharing of electrons, and this sharing makes these elements stable. This is compact formula is CH4, and this CH4 is very very important for all of you. Methane है ना, greenhouse gases में हमको इसको पढ़ना ही है. Carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide are greenhouse gases apart from F gases. It is most important. It keep coming again and again, right? So if you understand the language of science, this bond length has around nanometer, 0.15 nanometer, but I am not getting into more details. It is a strong bond. So how do you tell it is a strong bond? Its strength is 83 kilocalorie per mole. And if you know about mole, mole is basically unit of, or standard unit, SI unit of quantity of matter, right? 83 kilocalorie, it means 83 kilocalorie per mole. Energy you need to break this bond. This is what strength means, break this bond. Okay, and why I am talking of all these things inside our body physiologically, try to understand the significance in biochemistry at physiological means जैसे हमारी बॉडी के अंदर जो टेम्परेचर है, फॉर एग्जांपल physiological relevant temperature, for example, our body has around 37 degrees Celsius temperature. It is not going to break. They don't break, right? So inside our body, at physiological temperature, for example 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degree Fahrenheit, this bond is not going to break. It means this is kind of a stable bond, this is what is the relevance. So if it is not going to break, what it can does, it can rotate. You can rotate these molecules, you can stretch these molecules, what you can do, but you can bend these molecules. They are not going to break, and essentially they are going to be very very important actors in proteins. Because proteins get rotated, they get stretched, they get bent at time. That is basically all right. So all life forms is basically just making or breaking bonds. Okay, so chemistry has to do this, right? Okay, so I am not getting much detail in this video alone. So we are going to talk about, all right, okay. So we will talk about, now we are going to talk about hydrogen bonds, right? Okay, so let's talk about hydrogen bonds now. So sharing of electron, we have talked, okay. So sharing of electron, we have talked, so if you want to talk a bit more, for example, this water, water molecule. This sharing has interesting thing, there are two kinds of molecules you could have. One is First of all, one are non-polar molecules, right? Non-polar molecules simply means, carbon, for example, this electron pair is in middle. So effectively, they don't have magnet-like behavior. They are non-polar bonds. Sharing is equal, this sharing is equal. This sharing is equal, they are non-polar. They don't have any magnet kind of thing, they don't attract. They are sharing equally actually. And others are called polar molecules. Polar molecules are important in chemistry. For example, we have water, water, this molecule. So you can say it makes some kind of, this kind of sharing is this, this bond is like this bond is like this, and there is one angle basically, and this angle is what? 104.5 degree. Polar molecules are formed when one molecule has more greediness, when one element is more greedier, more greedier for electrons. It loves electrons. For example, we have hydrogen and oxygen. Oxygen, right? So oxygen, what oxygen is going to do? Oxygen loves electron more. Oxygen is more electronegative. In the language of science, we call electronegativity, and oxygen has more electronegativity. मतलब कहने का मतलब क्या है? इलेक्ट्रॉन ज्यादा पसंद है किसको? ऑक्सीजन को. So oxygen has got some minor negative charge, right? Delta minus. We call delta. Delta means small amount. And hydrogen has got, and it has become, hydrogen got small positive charge, and it has become like a small magnet, a small magnet. And there is beauty of these magnets. They start interacting. We are going to talk about van der Waals forces, for example, right? And water has, for example, this oxygen is going to get in water molecule. So let me make you easy one first, right? This is okay. Here we go. Like this, water molecule, for example, hydrogen is here. Again, if you have understood the basic principle, this electron is more attracted, who likes more electron? Oxygen. Delta minus. Delta minus means a small amount of charge, thoda sa wo negative ho jayega. And hydrogen is going to be positive charge. And again, it has become, so water has become like magnet. Water has two poles, one, this is negative pole, this is positive pole. So water molecule has become magnet. What is this? This is H2O. So H2O behaves like small magnets. And this is very, very important, like we have polar molecules. I have told you carbon and hydrogen, right? So they, neither carbon nor hydrogen likes electron too much, they have equal sharing. And polar molecules are basically, they have unequal sharing. What basic chemistry hai? Unequal sharing. And I am teaching this, course to particularly those kids, those aspirant, who have not yet done science very well. If you are not very good at science, still you can understand these basic nuances, right? So hydrogen bond is an interesting bond, this hydrogen is, typically you will understand hydrogen bonds. Let me tell you, like, best example is water. Water molecules, you have studied it, for example, this is hydrogen, this is another, water molecule, है ना? तो आप ध्यान से समझने की कोशिश करना, इस पर कितना चार्ज है? नेगेटिव चार्ज, and it has got a small positive charge. Again, this is minus charge, this is positive charge. If these elements come together, if two water molecules come together, this oxygen is basically attracted by this hydrogen, and this force between this oxygen and hydrogen is called basically H bond, because this is because of hydrogen, right? So hydrogen and any electronegative, for example, oxygen, nitrogen, if it comes closer to hydrogen, they form hydrogen bond. This is the basic idea of hydrogen bond, slightly negative charge. So hydrogen, in hydrogen bonds, this is the best example. Again, for example, if we have this, oxygen molecule, water molecule, hydrogen has got, if I were to use another pen, if it has got some positive charge, some negative charge, there is some kind of bond, this, this is hydrogen bond. You can make a large many number of bonds, like this, okay? And this is particularly, important for water and structure of water molecule, right? Okay, so essentially what is happening? Slightly positive charge on, hydrogen hydrogen is attracted by slightly negative charge on elements like oxygen, nitrogen, etc. Right? Etc. Okay. This is the most important. What is most important thing about these bonds? They are not very strong, not very weak, not very strong. These bonds, if I were to talk about their strength, it is 1/20th of 83 kilocalorie. So do you remember? So it is strength. If we were to talk about strength of this bond, it is 1/20th of 1/20th, right? 1/20th of covalent bonds. Okay, so importantly 1/20th of 83 kilocalorie per mole. It simply means it will come out like what? 24 cha 80, 24.1, right? 4.15. okay, so if you were to okay, 4.1 kilocalorie per mole. Why this is important? This is important. 1/20th, how much is this? 4.1 kilocalorie around, right? So if it is visible or not, you should understand. The strength of this bond is what? 4.1 kilocalorie. So if you compare it with 83 kilocalorie per mole, you have this, bond. This is very important. Why important? It is important in biochemistry because at physiological, temperature, this can be broken down. So in our body, these bonds are broken and they are, again made and broken. This keep happening inside our body. So at physiological, why? At physiological condition, right? Physiological condition, simply it 37 degrees Celsius, for example, this temperature, these bonds can be broken, है ना? Right? तो ये कहां पर होते हैं? DNA में, which we are going to talk. These bonds, H bonds can be broken, hydrogen bonds can be broken and made also. This is the most important aspect of why we study hydrogen bond, right? All right. So in the next class or next video, we are going to talk about DNA, right? And I am going to tell you DNA has 4 bases, right? These are adenine, thymine, cytosine and guanine, and they are bonded with, these are bonded with hydrogen bonds. They are like, chain होती ना, chain को ऐसे खोल देते हैं, तो ये hydrogen bonds के कारण, it is zipping like hydrogen bonds because of hydrogen bonds, and this is why hydrogen bond is very, very important. Okay, so we wind up this video. I think today it is enough, and you must have enjoyed this class. So we have talked about basic structure, basic chemistry of cell. Okay, so thank you so very much. If you like this video, don't forget to hit like button, don't forget to hit share button. फिर मिलेंगे, तब तक के लिए नमस्कार. Thank you so very much.